Sarah pushed the door, and there it was, sitting in the living room, motionless. Its small feet dangled over the edge of the sofa, its gaze fixed lifelessly on the empty wall. "Leo," she called, her voice breaking the oppressive silence of the house. It did not answer. That silence, that stare. She felt it immediately. Something was wrong. "Leo, honey, mommy's home." Nothing. Not a smile, not a blink. Just a rigid face and deep black eyes. She knelt gently, placing a hand on the child's knee. It blinked slowly, then looked at her. It finally looked at her, but it wasn't the gaze of a child. It was the gaze of an observer, an analytical look, measuring you as if you were a foreign object. She pulled back, a chill running down her spine. "Leo, don't you recognize me?" Its lips moved, but not a word came out, just a short breath like a swallowed whisper. Then it smiled, a flat smile devoid of joy, of light. Sarah didn't scream, but her whole body was screaming from the inside. A few hours earlier, she was still in her car, smiling, happy, eager to see her son again after a short trip. She had only been gone for a day, an important interview for a software engineer position in Portland, a few hours' drive from their small house in rural Oregon. Leo had stayed with Mrs. Gable, the kind elderly neighbor who often helped her. He adored her. Everything was perfect. So why did her stomach now twist as if she had just stepped into a stranger's house? Sarah called out softly, "Mrs. Gable." No answer, not a sound. Only Leo sitting in the living room like an abandoned statue. Where had she gone? In the evening, Sarah tried to act as if everything was normal. She prepared his favorite macaroni and cheese. She called him. He shuffled slowly to the table. He sat down, stared at the plate, and said in a low voice, too low for a 6-year-old, "This is not what I eat." "What did you say?" Sarah asked, her heart beginning to pound. It looked at her and repeated slowly, "I said this is not what I eat." It bowed its head for a moment, then turned to her and said, "You are not my real mother." Sarah was startled. What happened when I was away? She wondered. "If you don't want to eat, then go to bed." Leo stood up and walked to his bedroom. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat in her room, her back against the door. Late at night, she heard whispers in the living room. But there was only one child in this house. She slowly stood up, her heart hammering in her chest. She didn't turn on the lights, walking barefoot to the slightly ajar door. The living room was shrouded in darkness. She saw Leo standing there. He wasn't talking to himself, but to something or someone. "No, she hasn't seen anything yet. Not yet," it said. That voice. It wasn't Leo's. It was deep and ancient. Sarah froze, holding her breath. Then she saw its shadow move. It didn't walk. It glided slowly as if floating across the floor, and suddenly it turned towards her. "Mommy, can't you sleep?" it said. An icy current ran down her spine. It was looking at her in the dark as if it could see through walls. She didn't answer. She rushed back to her room and slammed the door. Her legs were trembling. Her throat burned. "No, this is not my son," she told herself. She didn't want to be alone with it anymore. She still didn't understand what was happening. But a primal fear gripped her, a fear that every mother dreads, that the child she loved more than life itself was no longer himself. Tomorrow morning she had to go to Mrs. Gable's. She had to know what happened. There had to be a rational explanation. Maybe he had a fever or fell and hit his head. Anything was better than the terrible truth creeping into her mind. Dawn broke through the curtains, pale gray streaks of light painting the floor. Sarah hadn't slept a second. She had sat on the floor, back pressed against her bedroom door, listening to every tiny sound in her own home. A creak of the floorboards, the whistle of wind through a window frame, the terrifyingly steady breathing from the room down the hall. Each sound twisted into a symphony of fear. "This is not my son." The thought repeated, a cold refrain in her mind. As soon as the morning light was strong enough to banish the worst of the shadows, she gathered her courage. She needed answers. And there was only one person who could give them to her. She crossed the dew-soaked lawn to Mrs. Gable's house. The small country-style home looked peaceful with bright red geraniums hanging from the porch. Mrs. Gable was there on her swing chair, a pair of pruning shears in hand, carefully snipping away wilted roses. She smiled when she saw Sarah. "Good morning, dear," she said, her voice warm and familiar. "Was our Leo a good boy?" Sarah approached, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "Mrs. Gable, I need to ask you something." Mrs. Gable looked up a little surprised. "While I was away, did anything strange happen? An accident? A dream? Any odd behavior?" The old woman shook her head, then paused. "Strange? Not really. He just fell down the well." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The what?" "Oh, he was playing out back. Must have gotten too close to the edge and slipped. But don't you worry," Mrs. Gable added casually, as if talking about spilling a glass of milk. "The gardeners next door heard the splash, and we pulled him out right away. He was perfectly fine, not a scratch on him. He was even laughing." Sarah took a step back, her mind reeling. "He was laughing. Yes, like he was having a grand time. Surprised me too," Mrs. Gable said. "He didn't even cry." Sarah stood frozen, then mumbled more to herself than to the old woman. "Leo has always been afraid of water, even in the bath." And then everything became horrifically clear. The thing that was pulled from the well was not her son. It hadn't come up alone. At noon, Sarah tried to talk to her son. She tried to keep her voice gentle, like a mother like before. "Leo, do you remember when we went to the sea at Cannon Beach?" It stared at her, unblinking. "There was a tiny little crab that scared you. Remember?" She continued, her voice almost pleading. "You cried and I bought you a strawberry lollipop." It tilted its head. Then slowly it declared, "I do not like strawberries." Sarah smiled weakly. "Yes, you do. You love them. You'd say they made your tongue tingle, but you always laughed afterward." "That wasn't me." Sarah's hands froze. "What do you mean that wasn't you?" Leo looked directly into her eyes, his dark, deep eyes like two bottomless pits. And it said, its voice cold and alien, "How much longer do you want me to pretend?" Sarah convinced herself her son was unwell. "It must be the fever," she told herself, clinging to the last shred of rational explanation. But deep down, she knew it was a lie. That night she heard a knock on her bedroom door. "Mommy," a sweet, harmless voice. She got up thinking it was Leo, but when she opened the door, no one was there. Only two wet footprints on the wooden floor right in front of the door, as if someone invisible had just been standing there waiting for her. She rushed to her son's room and found him fast asleep, breathing steadily. She went back to bed, trembling, trying to banish the image of the mysterious footprints. The next morning, as soon as she opened her eyes, she heard his voice, her son's voice, right above her. "Mommy, are you still sleeping?" And when she looked up, it was there, stuck to the ceiling, upside down. Its head was craned down to look at her, its eyes wide open, and a grin that stretched from ear to ear. She screamed a piercing shriek of pure horror and desperation and shot up. Instantly, the image vanished. Leo was sitting on the edge of the bed, calm, peaceful, as if nothing had happened. She had to do something. She couldn't live like this. She decided to take him to the pediatrician. Maybe her friend Dr. Evelyn Reed could find something, a brain tumor, a neurological disorder, anything that could explain this nightmare. Anything but the truth she didn't dare to face. Dr. Evelyn Reed's office was an oasis of calm. The walls were painted a soft sky blue, cartoon drawings were neatly hung, and a corner of the room was filled with shiny wooden toys. Everything was designed to reassure anxious little minds. But it had no effect on Sarah. To her, this tranquility was artificial, a mask for the chaos screaming inside her. Evelyn, a friend from college, greeted her with her usual warm and kind smile. "He seems calm," she said, observing Leo sitting obediently on the examination table, his feet dangling gently. Evelyn took out her instruments, examining Leo carefully. Temperature, blood pressure, heart rate. She listened to his lungs, checked his reflexes with a small rubber hammer. Everything was perfect. No problems, no fever, no abnormal neurological signs. All his vitals are excellent, Sarah, Evelyn concluded with a relieved smile. Sarah turned to her, the desperation in her eyes growing more pronounced. Are you sure you checked thoroughly, Evelyn? I mean really thoroughly. She lowered her voice to an urgent whisper. Look into his eyes. That's not my son. He's not himself anymore. Evelyn sighed softly, her gaze full of sympathy. Sarah, you're exhausted. You just got back from a business trip. You're stressed. You know sometimes children change. They go through phases. But Sarah cut her off, her voice sharp as a knife. No, this isn't a phase. This is a replacement. Evelyn recoiled slightly at the intensity in her friend's words. She placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. Listen, maybe you need to rest a bit. Maybe we should talk to a therapist for both of you. Sarah wasn't listening anymore. She lifted Leo off the examination table, feeling a coldness radiating from the child's skin. She mumbled her thanks and left the clinic feeling defeated and more alone than ever. The world of logic and science had slammed its door in her face. No one believed her. As she was buckling Leo into the back seat, her phone rang. It was a number she hadn't seen in months. Mark, her brother. Hello? She answered, her voice tired. Sarah, it's me. Mark's voice came through a bit rough but familiar. Listen, this is a bit weird. I was on my way back from Seattle and my damn truck just broke down right in your town. Would you mind if I crashed for a night? The repair shops are all closed. A sudden wave of relief washed over Sarah. Any other adult in the house was better than being alone with it. Yes, of course. Where are you? When they got home, Mark was already sitting on the front porch next to his duffel bag. He was a big man with broad shoulders and hands calloused from years of construction work. He hugged her a firm, protective embrace. You look tired, kiddo, he said. They went inside. Mark sat down on the sofa and Leo came out of his room. The smile on Mark's face vanished instantly. He stared at his nephew, and all the color drained from his face. He fell in the well, didn't he? He asked bluntly without any preamble. Sarah nodded in silence, a cold sense of shame and fear welling up inside her. Mark turned to her, his eyes serious and filled with an ancient understanding she had never seen in her brother before. Sarah, he said, his voice low, the thing that climbed out of that well was not your son. Her heart seemed to stop. You know about these things. He nodded slowly. Grandma used to tell me the old stories. Back home, they call them the imitators. They live in stagnant water in the darkness in forgotten places. But why Leo? Sarah whispered, tears beginning to fall. They are always drawn to pure children, the ones whose souls are still clear. A child falls into the water. If he doesn't scream, if he doesn't cry, then the thing that climbs out is no longer him. The child's silence is an invitation. Sarah collapsed into an armchair, finally having her horror validated. Then, where is my Leo, my real son? Mark looked at her for a long time, then said in a voice even grimmer than before, He's still there, trapped on the other side. And every night you sleep under the same roof with that thing, your connection to him gets a little weaker. Soon there will be nothing left to save. Night fell on the small Oregon house, but tonight, the darkness seemed thicker, heavier. Every creak of the floor, every rustle of leaves outside the window made Sarah jump. Mark's presence offered some comfort, but it also confirmed that her worst fears were real. Her son had been stolen, and something terrible had taken his place. They sat in the dimly lit living room speaking in whispers while the creature wearing Leo's form slept in its room. We have to do something, Sarah said, her voice trembling. We can't just leave it here. Mark rubbed his tired face. There is someone, he said after a long silence. A healer. His name is Soulless. He lives deep in the woods near the Cascade Mountains. Grandma said he's the only one who has ever successfully banished one of these spirits back to its world. A flicker of hope ignited in Sarah, but it was quickly extinguished by fear. What if What if the spirit doesn't want to leave? She whispered. Mark sighed a heavy breath. Then your son is lost forever, Sarah. And the thing living here will take his voice, his memories, your love for him. Eventually, you'll never know the difference. The thought was more terrifying than death. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood outside Leo's bedroom, pressing her ear against the cold wooden door. And then she heard it. Singing. But it wasn't a children's lullaby. It was an ancient, jagged language sounds that hissed and clicked and did not belong in a human throat. Its voice was hoarse, as if vocal cords were scraping against stone. As soon as dawn broke, Sarah, Mark, and Leo were on the road in Mark's old pickup truck. They drove east, leaving the rolling hills of the Willamette Valley and heading deeper into the dense primeval forests that covered the Cascade Range. The air grew crisper, cooler, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. They arrived in the middle of the afternoon. Silas's cabin was nestled in a small clearing surrounded by giant fir trees that towered like silent sentinels. Smoke curled lazily from a stone chimney. Silas was sitting on his porch, a large oaken staff laid across his lap. He was an old man, his skin wrinkled like tree bark, his eyes clear and seemingly all-seeing. Before Sarah could even open her mouth, he spoke, his voice low and resonant like distant thunder. Say nothing, woman of sorrow. I felt it the moment you turned onto the path. The water has taken your son, and the water is still watching you. Sarah swallowed her tears. Mark stepped forward, lowering his voice. Sir, we need your help. The healer nodded slowly. Bring me a basin of water, he commanded, and bring the child here. A few minutes later, Leo, or the thing wearing his face, was brought out of the truck and into the small yard. As soon as it crossed an invisible threshold, the leaves on the trees trembled in a non-existent breeze. The healer didn't move, but his voice rang out even deeper than before. Come no closer. Place the basin between us. Mark obeyed. Leo, or the entity, approached the basin of water slowly. It stared at Silas without blinking. Then it spoke, and the voice that came from its mouth was not that of a 6-year-old child. You are old and nearly dead. Why do you wish to meddle in things you cannot comprehend? A dead silence fell over the clearing. Even the birds went quiet. Silas gave a faint smile. So this is your true voice, he murmured. A voice without age, a voice that predates human language. Sarah recoiled. That voice. It wasn't Leo's. It was distorted, hollow, as if two beings were speaking at once through a single mouth. Silas struck his staff on the ground 3 times. The water in the basin immediately turned black as ink. It is time to talk, he said. You who lives in a body not your own, where do you come from? The child stared at him. Then for the first time it blinked strangely from the bottom up and replied, from the deep places, where the screams of children never reach the surface. Silas raised a thin, bony hand. Enough. You have spoken. Now listen. This place is no longer for you. This body is not for you. The creature in Leo's guise laughed, a dry, cold sound that made the leaves on the ground rustle. Sarah has fed me. She has held me. And she has believed me. Then it turned to look at Sarah, a long, soul-piercing gaze. You loved me, didn't you? No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Then why do you want me to leave? Sarah stumbled back, the tears finally coming hot on her cheeks. Because I want my real son back, the one who was afraid of the dark, the one who smiled when he ran to me. You look at me like one looks at a stone. The healer sighed, a sound like wind through dry branches. He spoke to Sarah, his tone solemn. The bond is still there, but it is fragile. You must go to where your son is held captive. You must call him by his true name, not the one you use at home, but the one only a mother can feel in her soul. Sarah looked at him desperately. But how can I find that name? I don't remember. He raised his staff. You do not have to remember. You must feel it. If you call him by the right name, he will return. but the other will not let you go easily. She glanced one last time at the imitation child at that mask, and it smiled slowly at her. If you go down there, it whispered, its voice now a ghastly mix of Leo's and the ancient whisper, you will not come up alone. Then it was gone. Not vanished into thin air, but more as if it had never been there at all. Sarah burst into tears. What's happening? She asked in terror. The thing you brought here was not your son, Silas said calmly. To bring your son back, we need a body of stagnant water, like the well he fell into. The healer led them to a place in the forest that most people avoided, the ancient marsh, a still black body of water hidden deep in a clearing. It was said that sometimes at dawn you could hear your own name being whispered from its depths. When they arrived, Silas had everything prepared. Torches were stuck in a circle around the marsh, their flickering light dancing on the dark water. Black salt was sprinkled in a protective circle around the water's edge, and a shallow ceramic bowl was placed on a red cloth. Mark took Sarah's hand, his fingers trembling. Silas stood opposite the marsh, his silhouette against the twilight sky. Tonight you will cross over, he said. He handed her a wooden cup filled with water from the marsh and invited her to take 3 sips. Each sip is a step towards forgetting the real world and a step back into the world in between. A strange warmth spread through her body as she drank, as if something was alive in the water itself. Her head spun. The world became blurry heavy. Go towards the marsh. Go barefoot and step into the water. When you can no longer feel the ground beneath your feet, let yourself float. She walked slowly. The cool water touched her toes. It was warm, heavy, and strangely silent, but it enveloped her. Go on, Sarah, Silas shouted. Even if you hear your name, do not answer. She waded in up to her waist. Then suddenly there was no bottom. She fell, not a fall, but as if something was swallowing her. She landed standing upright in a strange world, a world that was damp, dark, but glowing from within. Before her was a door made of dry clay with no handle, but a handprint in the middle. She placed her hand on it, and the ground seemed to exhale. Then a voice called out, Mommy? She ran. The water rose thick, viscous. Leo, it's me. Answer me. I'm here. She saw it. Dozens of children stood motionless. The same height, the same face. Eyes wide open, mouths shut. But she recognized him, the tiny mole near his ear, the fear in his eyes. Sarah approached, her heart pounding. She searched her memory. The nights of her pregnancy, the whispers, the name that was never spoken aloud, but was engraved in her heart. Caleb, she called. Everything shook. The children blinked, their faces melting like wax. They screamed, but Leo Caleb cried and threw himself into her arms. I never want to go back there again, Mommy. Sarah held him tight, but a dark shadow approached from behind her. The same height as Leo, the same face, but with empty eyes and a hollow voice. You cannot take him. He is mine now. No, you took his form, not his soul. His name. I was the first to whisper his name. You cannot have him. The shadow advanced. The water rose, the ground trembled. Sarah screamed. Silas, bring us back. Bring us back now. A flash of light, a shock. Darkness. She woke up lying on the bank of the marsh. Leo Caleb was beside her. He was breathing, he was there. But in the basin of water placed right next to them, there were 2 reflections, hers and another, faceless, but present. At that moment, all that mattered was that her son had returned. They drove home in silence. It was late. Sarah barely slept, holding Caleb tightly. His color had returned. He was breathing normally. But something was wrong. She opened her eyes. A shiver. Not from the cold. A shiver of warning. The kind of feeling that wakes you up for no reason. She listened. And then she heard a breath. But not hers. Not Caleb's. A third breath. Slow rattling like a strangled exhale. Her heart began to pound. She didn't move. She just clutched Caleb closer. Tears had already begun to fall. She raised her hand, gently stroking her son's hair to reassure herself. But suddenly Caleb's hand gripped hers. Cold, rigid, unnaturally strong. She jumped, whipping her head around to see his eyes wide open, fixed on the void as if in a trance. "Mommy." His voice was low, a little sleepy, but it was the difference that terrified her. She screamed. Caleb woke with a start. "Mom, what's wrong? I'm cold." His normal gaze had returned. He was trembling. He didn't understand, but she had seen it. Something had just slid through the space between the door and the floor. A long, thin shadow. It crept slowly, silently, like a black liquid, and disappeared into a corner of the room. Sarah didn't dare to move. She sat there until dawn. They were back. Sarah and Caleb. The two of them, just the two of them. Finally free. Or almost. Because sometimes, when she looked in the bathroom mirror, she would see it just behind her own reflection, smiling, waiting. Because what you open can never be fully closed. And what you bring back from that place is never alone.